Filing is one of the most important branches of the fitter's craft. The correct use of files calls for considerable skill which can only be acquired by practice. The file is an indispensable tool to the metal worker, for no matter how well machining may be done, the file has to be used to take off that last half-thousandth which the machine is not sensitive enough to remove. The fine sense of touch and ability to move a file in a true straight horizontal line is not easily attained. Try hard, concentrate on the job, and avoid wrong methods, and you will soon find that you have made yourself master of your file. The principal initial difficulty is due to the natural tendency of the hands to work from the shoulders and to move in arcs with the shoulder joints as centers. This is an exaggerated example. Actually, the beginner's action is more like this. It's obvious that he's only filing the front and back edges of the job. What he has to learn is how to make straight, level strokes like these. It's not easy to explain how to use a file so as to make it move in a true plane, but a useful tip is to aim at the center of the area being filed and avoid the metal near the edges. In doing this, the worker will almost unconsciously fall into the proper action by degrees. By resisting and counteracting the tendency of the left hand to rise, caused by the arc movement from the shoulders, the proper action may gradually be acquired. You will be helped by the shape of the file, which is slightly bellied in its length. This means that you can pick out any part of the surface and remove a certain amount of metal without touching the surrounding area. This curvature also helps you to avoid the edges, which you naturally tend to file harder than the middle of the job. A file essentially is a piece of hardened steel, the surface of which is cut to form a large number of small teeth. The size of these teeth varies to provide for fine, medium or coarse filing. You see here in diagram the actual nature of the teeth. Note particularly that the shape is such that they only cut when the file is pushed this way and not on the return stroke. Also note the straight path the file should follow when in use. Cutting stroke, return, cutting stroke, return, and so on. One of the most important aids to good filing is to stand at the right height for the job. If you are too high, you will have to stoop, which will strain your arms unduly and make it hard to maintain an even pressure on the job. If you're too low, the strain on the body will be excessive. The height of the bench should be such that you can stand square to the job and feel comfortable while filing. The nature of the job in hand also affects the desirable height, because with heavy coarse filing, more weight is needed, and the job must be low enough for you to exert all the pressure of your body. In this case, the surface of the job should be lower than your elbow. But for light filing, it may be much higher, high enough to avoid stooping. For heavy filing, you stand well away from the job, with feet well apart, thus. Watch how this man gets all the weight of his body behind each stroke. In ordinary and light filing, it's possible to work upright all the time. The arms alone supply whatever pressure is needed. In extremely light and short filing, especially with holes, wrist action alone is sufficient. The great thing is to discover which is the most comfortable attitude within the limitations of the job and work accordingly. Now as to the choice of your file for the job you have to tackle. Few people outside engineering circles realize what a great number of different sorts of files there are. Sizes, shapes, and formations of the cutting teeth vary within wide limits. This is a flat file and is made in various thicknesses. They are used for removing metal from flat surfaces. Here's a square file, a square in section, One side of it is smooth or safe. This will act as a guide and will not cut into the side of the square hole, one face only of which is to be reduced. The corners of a nut have been burred over by a clumsy worker. Use a square file with a safe side against the bolt seating. These are triangular files used where the right angle of a square file is too obtuse, for instance in sharpening the teeth of a saw. Round files are made in various sizes and used for enlarging circular holes, finishing the radial ends of slots, and the like. The knife edge file. These are designed to deal with narrow places often encountered in instrument making and gauge work. This is the sort of hole and corner situation where the knife edge file is useful. It can also be used as a saw. This type of file varies in size down to the small Swiss file, being used here in the delicate final trimming of the teeth on a gear wheel. Another shape commonly met with is the half-round file for enlarging curves and similar work. By the way, always fit a handle to your file. Without it, you're only adding to the difficulty of doing a good job of work, and also, unless the sharp tang is covered, it can cause a nasty wound in your hand or wrist. Files, like other tools, must be kept clean, and what you have to guard against is fragments of metal choking the pores between the teeth. A file card, which is a kind of a steel brush, is used for this purpose. The packed fragments of some of the softer metals, like cast iron, brass, gunmetal, are simply dislodged by giving the file a smart tap, at which they fall out. But this choking is sometimes done deliberately and has the effect of reducing the depth to which the teeth will cut, thus giving the work a smoother finish. Chalk is the thing to use. New files and old files vary as their suitability for different metals. You start off your new files on brass, gunmetal, bronze, aluminium and kindred alloys. Later they pass on to cast iron, wrought iron and steel. Worn files won't cut well on brass and the like because their worn teeth don't penetrate, nor will your really worn file bite into cast iron satisfactorily. But it will easily cut fibrous metals like wrought iron and steel. Under any conditions of file or materials, a file will always cut a narrow surface more easily than a broad one. Old files may therefore be kept for narrow work and used up on it. Old files also must be reserved for sandy and scaly surfaces of castings and forgings. Nor should a good file be used on tool steel, especially if the hardness of the tool is in doubt, because a few strokes will take off the keen points. Also, if the file touches the hardened jaws of the vise, it will be subject to rapid deterioration. We've endeavoured to run over a wide subject in a very short space of time. The rest is up to you. Let me repeat the words with which this film started. Filing is one of the most important branches of the fitter's craft. The correct use of files calls for considerable skill, which can only be acquired by practice.